Today I'm reading Little Polar Bear Finds a Friend by Hans de Beer. Last, the little polar bear was very lonely. As he gazed across the cool blue ocean, he wished he had a friend to play with. When he got home, Last's mother could tell right away that something was wrong. "Why are you so sad?" she asked. "Because I have no friends here," said Last glumly. "Don't worry," said his mother. "One day you'll find someone to play with." The next morning, when Last went out for a walk, he thought he saw another little polar bear standing next to a big wooden box. "I should go over and say hello," thought Last, but when he got closer, he realized that the polar bear was made of wood. Last smelled food, so he walked into the box to see what it was. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the door on the end of the box snapped shut. Last was trapped. It was so dark inside the box that Last couldn't see a thing. He threw himself against the door, but it wouldn't open. Last sat in the box for hours. He thought about his parents and how worried they must be when he didn't come home. Suddenly he heard voices outside. The box began to move, and Last felt it being lifted. He was very scared. The box bumped up and down and rocked back and forth for another hour. When it finally stopped moving, Last cried out, but no one opened the door. Then the box began to shake, and Last heard a loud roar. He felt as if he was being pushed downwards and backwards, and there was a funny feeling in his tummy. Then the feeling passed. Last was now very tired, so he curled up in the box and fell asleep. The next thing Last knew, there was a loud crash, and at last the door to the box burst open. Last found himself in a strange place, filled with many wooden boxes and lots of strange smells. "Hey, little polar bear, come over here," said a deep, friendly voice. Last looked up and was startled to see a huge walrus. "What are you doing here?" asked Last. "I was trapped just like you," said the walrus. "The owl says that we're being taken to a zoo." "What's a zoo?" asked Last. "I don't know," grunted the walrus, "and I don't want to find out. Do you think you could lift the latch on this cage?" Last banged the latch with his paws, and finally it swung open. The walrus lumbered out of his cage, and together they started to free all the other animals. As the cages were opened, Last was surrounded by many animals he had never seen before. But the biggest surprise came out of the last box, a little brown bear whose name was Bee. The walrus was very clever, and soon he had found a way to escape. But all the animals were so happy to be free that they ran away, leaving the slow walrus behind. "Wait for me!" he cried after them. When Last and Bee heard the walrus cry, they stopped, turned around, and went back to help their friend. "I'm sorry we ran off," said Last. "We started together and we'll finish together." By the time the three of them reached the woods, it was dark. They barely escaped being caught in the bright glare of searchlights. When they were deep in the woods and out of danger, Last, Bee, and the walrus fell asleep. The next morning, when Last woke up, he was surprised to hear Bee crying. "What's wrong?" asked Last. "We're not in danger anymore." "It's my parents," sobbed Bee. "They were captured earlier, and I'll probably never see them again." "I'm sorry," said Last. But then he had an idea. "Why don't you come home with me?" he said happily. "You can be my sister." "But won't your parents be upset because I'm brown?" asked Bee. "Of course not," said Last. "Bears are bears." When the walrus woke up, the three of them talked about how they would get home. "If we could find a river," said the Walrus, "I could carry the two of you on my back." While the Walrus talked, Bee noticed some bees flying around a tree. "I'm hungry," Bee said, turning to Lars. "Will you help me get some honey?" Lars had never seen bees before, and he was afraid. He hid behind some bushes with the Walrus. Lars and the Walrus liked the honey very much, and as soon as they had eaten, the three friends set off to find a river. As they walked along, Lars couldn't believe how many trees there were in the forest. Luckily, Bee had such a good sense of smell that she quickly led them to a small stream. The Walrus jumped right in and rolled around. "This feels great," he said happily. "Climb on my back and let's get going." As the Walrus swam along, the stream turned into a river. Lars told Bee all about his wonderful home. Then Lars noticed a familiar smell. "We're coming to a city," he said. "I visited a city once. We must be very careful. Let's stop until it gets dark." While the three of them sat on the river bank and waited for the sun to go down, Lars told them about his adventure in the city. "I met some nice cats," he said, "but everything is very dirty. My home is much nicer than a city." The next day, Lars and the Walrus recognized the smell of salty seawater. "We're almost home," Lars said to Bee. "Not quite," said the Walrus. "We still have far to go, and first we have to pass through those big gates up ahead." Soon they found themselves in the middle of the ocean. A storm had started, and the waves were getting bigger and bigger. "Hang on tight," yelled the Walrus. At last the three friends arrived in the Arctic. Bee stared at the strange landscape. She had seen snow before, but she had never seen so much of it. The Walrus dropped Lars and Bee off near Lars's home. It was time to say goodbye. "Thanks for waiting for me," said the Walrus. "I never would have made it home without you." "And we never would have made it without you," said Lars. As the Walrus swam away, Lars and Bee set out to find Lars's parents. Bee was having trouble walking on the ice and snow. She kept slipping and sliding. Suddenly Lars saw his parents and ran up to greet them. Bee slid along behind him. "Where have you been?" said his mother. "We were so worried about you." Lars quickly told his parents about his latest adventure and explained that Bee had been separated from her parents. "She's afraid that you won't let her stay because she's brown," said Lars. "That's silly," said Lars's father. "Bears are bears." Lars's mother gave Bee a big hug. "You're a very beautiful bear," she said. "You can stay with us as long as you like." Lars was very happy. "I can't wait to get home," he said. "There are so many things I want to show my new friend." And that's the end of today's story.